Can't do that here either. Okay, so I'll stand really far away from it. So today you've heard all sorts of things about how the economy is changing really fast, digital transformation, everything's changing at a rapid pace. That includes this presentation. I just recently, and by just recently I mean very recently, as in a week ago, just left a tier 1 automotive supplier based out of Japan. So I'm going to be talking about that experience. And actually it's pretty cool. Spent 2.5 years in Japan, in Hiroshima specifically, and worked on digitally transforming one of those big automotive companies. So I think this is a cool presentation because as you were going through, it was really cool, interesting to me, but it's almost like the exact opposite of both sides of the coin. So I think it's going to be good for everybody. And most importantly, I think, out of everything is this proves that I have no idea what I'm doing because I'm flying back to Japan for my first marathon. I've never flown a marathon or run a marathon. I'm flying to Tokyo the day before the marathon, running the marathon, and then flying back. So that shows that I don't make good decisions generally in life. So what are 3 problems that I think apply to you, but also applied very specifically to that automotive supplier? Number 1 is worker shortage, and I know you've heard this today, you've heard this before. Let's talk about skill gap. Manufacturing's not cool, except it looks like manufacturing's pretty cool if I go by the last presentation. And I'm glad someone can articulate that because as someone who was 13 years in manufacturing, I can attest to manufacturing is pretty cool. You're 3D printing metal, which is pretty cool. We did laser welding of doors. And I always reminded our young engineers, I'm like, this is a James Bond movie. Like, you're actually shooting laser beams at metal, you know? So, but there's actually another problem too, which is the economy currently doesn't support the wages required to attract talent. So we can say manufacturing is as cool as we want. We can train people as quick as we want. However, if we can't find an economically viable way to compete with other wages in other industries, we're going to continue to have that worker shortage. And that ties into the second one, which is competitive and cost pressures. Most of you, I think, are from some industry. How many of you have no cost problems, no competition? Perfect, because you wouldn't be here, right? Otherwise, you'd be on the private jets that are flying overhead. And so we are all feeling that, right? And production is feeling that. Automotive is feeling that. I just keep getting louder and louder. Like I'm going to stand all the way in the back, I think, or something. And automotive's feeling it from technology and startups like we saw with Hackrod, right? It used to be that you could become a big behemoth of an automotive company, and that was that. You could just force out all the competition. And then we had people come along, right, changing regions, globalizing, and then we had people like Elon Musk who said, maybe we could do this. And he was right, made a lot of mistakes, did a lot of good things, right? And so there's this continual pressure that's coming on all organizations, but it's coming from places we didn't expect it before, right? We used to have to worry about GM, Ford, and that was about it, right? Now you're worrying about the small team in California coming along and stealing all your thunder. That is the kind of digital disruption that's going on, which leads to that third point, which is these pressures are coming from very unique places, very odd places, and I wish I had could be as articulate to say it, but it really is the 2 kids in the garage, right? Before that wasn't something you had to worry about so much. And so I think this ties in well to what we've been talking about, the 3D printing and new materials. And I love this quote, which is to say, the goal is not to become a digital company, right? Because really what we need to do as industrial companies, we need to use digital technology. And so it's not about necessarily just putting up a closed sign. Sears was a great example. There's a lot of analysts who have said the challenge that Sears had one of the greatest head starts, and they should have been the Amazon of today. Think about it. You used to be able to buy a house from Sears on rail, right? They would deliver a house to your city. They had the logistics done. They had the cataloging and the categorization done. The challenge was when everything switched from that, I don't even remember. I remember for Christmas, right? It was like 500-page thing that came to your house. When it came time to put that on a website, they didn't do it in time. And so it wasn't that Sears was doing anything wrong necessarily as Sears, it was that they didn't adopt the digital technology and incorporate it into their organization, and now I think they filed for bankruptcy, right? And they're very close to liquidating. So what does it look like, what I would say a true digital transformation and what we experienced? One is we need to differentiate products, right? And you've heard about that today already. You'll continue to hear about that. Even in the introduction, there was discussion about new materials, new ways of doing things, better batteries through different materials. And I think that's, maybe we don't all know how to execute it, but it's well understood that we have to do it, right? I think we have a general consensus around there. Operations is another one. It's a very difficult journey to go on, but I think there's consensus around traditional manufacturing companies need to transform their operations by utilizing the new technologies and solutions that exist. Where I don't think we're talking enough about today is this space here, the workers. And I kind of set this up and led into this when I said the shortage of workers. One of the reasons is that it's not an economically viable model. And one of those things is that we always see, and you've already seen today many slides, and they're correct, I'm not saying they're wrong. You've seen all these slides where you see machines connected to some digital system somewhere, or a sensor connected to a digital system. But what you haven't heard a lot of discussion around is the people that are in that process. And so to successfully go through a digital transformation, you have to consider, how do we bring our most valuable part of the organization, which is the team members, into that digital platform, digital solution set. And that's what we had to consider as well to be successful. And so let's actually talk about what we did. That's a quick kind of theory, but what I wanted to concentrate on was actually doing things and lessons learned. So first thing we wanted to do was make machines talk. So you can imagine in an automotive supplier's factory, there's tons and tons of hundreds of robots and thousands of sensors and control systems and drives and widgets and all of these things when you imagine a factory. And let's even talk about 3D printing. When you have these very expensive assets that are making these very expensive one-off cars, you need to be monitoring that asset, because if you've designed this great car and then the printer goes down, well, now you've just stopped that value chain completely. The challenge is, in traditional factories, is these are bespoke systems, right? Some were bought in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, yesterday. And I can guarantee you that nobody in the 90s was thinking about IoT when they built and designed a CNC machine. And in fact, the favorite CNC machine I like talking about when we first wanted to connect our 12 different CNC machines was one that had this very unique feature. It was very innovative. If it had an alarm, it would call your beeper, which for the time was probably very cool, completely useless in 2017 when we started. And so that's the challenge you have in a traditional factory setting, is the machine works just fine. You're not going to throw it away. But nobody was thinking that you could connect it to Wi-Fi and get an email on your phone or an alert in an app when they designed that machine. And so we had to start collecting data from these machines to make them talk. And so we used a solution called Kepware and really just started connecting to very old systems, very new systems, utilizing native communication in the machines that had just been purchased, and pushed it all up into a platform. Which in the case we used a platform called ThingWorx. Why did we do this, right? That's the tech side, the science side. Let's talk about why we did that. There was a inspection machine. This is the great example I like to use in Japan. We had an inspection machine for exhaust. And so if you're inspecting an exhaust system for a car, it does hundreds and hundreds of inspections on that one exhaust. And you do all these inspections, and then on top of that you have your ERP systems, your business systems, you have your execution systems, you have your quality software, you have your logistics software, and all of these are doing a great job at what they do, but they're not connected. And so therefore, you don't really have a good idea of what's actually going on in that inspection. You know, was it a good part or a bad part? You know, did I meet the order or miss the order? You know how many I need to make, but do you have all that in one? That's where you truly make a powerful decision, and that's where you start changing that conversation where we talked about of the economically viable model for our workers. Because if we give our team members all of this data from the machines and all the systems, now they can make very impactful decisions very quickly. And so I'm big on giving, what's the actual result. In the case of this small application where we attached it to an exhaust inspection system, we were able to combine quality data, inspection data, production ordering data, and then even we could show the picture of each inspection. So as the sensors made inspections, we would take pictures and store them, and then you could historically go back. Now, I told you that I worked at a Japanese automotive company. Of course, all automotive and all manufacturing companies have a continuous improvement culture, but I'm sure, as is famous, the Japanese manufacturing culture is very much rooted in that Kaizen improvement culture. So we had teams dedicated to improving processes. Every month, they would go and find a new project. And that was very valuable to do, but it took a long time of investigation. So what if you could double their workload? What if you could even, just get one more improvement project in a year? By providing all the data on one pane of glass and providing them the historically correlated data, the inspection teams or the improvement teams were able to reduce their overall project times by 80%. So think about that. We did nothing other than give them all the data on one pane of glass and give them historical context to that data. They were able to bring value to the organization in a time reduction of 80%. That's huge to any manufacturing or any enterprise organization. So taking the lessons learned then, what we really wanted to say is, okay, if we can get that kind of information and benefit out of one machine in a factory, what if we scale up? And so taking the lessons learned, we then moved into an entire production line and applied the same technologies. But we grew out one more. And so we said, okay, we learned how to connect machines. We learned how to connect manufacturing execution systems. What should we connect now? And so what we said is, well, why don't we pull in things like production scheduling and HR? One step more, right? So we kept our momentum going. We didn't grow too fast, just one step more, one step more. And what we found was this idea of connecting the HR systems paid off in a big way. In this factory where we applied to an entire production line, they have a very fair and unique way of scheduling. The plant runs 3 production shifts. And the traditional model is you start on 3rd shift, you work yourself up to 2nd shift, and then the most senior people work on 1st shift, right? And so if any of you work in factories, you know the famous problem, which is nothing bad happens on 1st shift and it all happens on 3rd shift. And there's many reasons for that. And one of them is because it tends to follow that traditional model of knowledge and experience where the least experienced work 3rd shift. At this organization, what we did is we actually had 3 shifts called A, B, and C. An A, B, and C shift would shuffle through 1st shift, 2nd shift, 3rd shift. And it was a very fair way for everyone to get the horribleness that is 3rd shift and get the pretty cool part of 1st shift and work the middle part of 2nd shift. That I think 2nd shift's the worst for me because you miss dinner and lunch and breakfast. So that one's probably the worst. And this is very fair to our team members on the production line. The challenge is, though, is if you try to find points of improvement, it becomes very difficult. Because the people running the production line during the day now aren't running it 2 weeks from now at the same time. And then 2 weeks from then are running it at a completely different time. And so how do you track that? How do you compare that to all the metrics coming off the production line, the quality metrics? Compare it to your KPIs, your production KPIs. It's very difficult. But because we had tied this into our HR system, we were actually able to pull, again, all that data onto one pane of glass. And so we were able to bring production line cycle times on a day-by-day basis together with data which showed who was actually working, A shift, B shift, C shift. And now we could start working with these teams to find opportunities for training, because all of this unseen data that's been in the factory the whole time, we knew who was working. It was in the HR system. We knew the KPIs off the production lines. Of course, it's being produced in the PLCs and control systems and robots all the time. We just could never see them together, bring that context together. And so we were able to do that and visualize the business in a new way. And not only that, but we also were able to start finding cause and effect relationships across an entire production line. As many of you know, production lines in automotive are very complicated systems. And there's all sorts of relationships throughout the production line that's, quite frankly, hard for us to visualize in real time. And so data on a spreadsheet doesn't work well for that. Because if I see downtime in station 1 and downtime in station 10, I would say, well, those probably aren't related because they're very far away. But if I can bring all the data together, I can actually track the cause and effect of all of these events that go on in the production line, which again is a great opportunity to improve what we're doing. And this is where we really start focusing on people. So the third step was then doing augmented reality pilots in the production line. And so let's think about someone like your quality inspectors in a factory. Quality inspectors are probably some of the most skilled people in a production facility. They have a lot of tribal knowledge. They have usually they have advanced degrees, quite honestly, up to PhDs at times. And so any 1 second you can pull of wasted time is great. And again, as I said before, we were ignoring the sensorization of these people. We only talked about sensorizing machines, yet the most impressive asset on the team was just completely ignored in our digital transformation. And so what we did is we utilized the same platforms, the Kepware to collect data, ThingWorx, and then Vuforia for augmented reality, and we actually piloted putting headsets on those inspectors and having them go through their inspection and being asked, okay, do this inspection for me, doing the inspection, and responding back in voice as to the results of their inspections. But what was even more powerful than that was if you have a paper report, and I say, well, there's a problem with this product, right, that I'm making. This door, there's a problem with it. We can't sell it. The reasoning might not fit in that paper report. There might not be a box for it. Where do I write it? On the back? Well, no one's going to see that. Now, all of a sudden, because we put the headsets on and we're using augmented reality, now we're able to say, take a video, take a picture. And so we actually had quality engineers taking videos and explaining the problem, showing the problem. That's useful. That's valuable because now we can send that to the engineers instead of trying to figure out what they meant and holding some WebExes and then having meetings and flying all over the world to figure out what's going on. We just send a video over. Oh, okay, I see exactly what the problem was and how we can fix that. So it was really powerful in that it allowed for rich reports, it allowed for even more compliance, and then also, and probably most importantly, it sped the velocity of our data because we went from paper reports which are collected, typed up, compiled, and sent on, to data that's straight from mouth to the database to live reporting to executives and leadership. And so that was a very interesting pilot we did, but also very powerful because we learned that velocity of data is really where you can get that extra value inside a manufacturing facility. So last, they asked me to share some of the lessons from this journey we had. And because of time, it was only 3 slides there, so it makes it sound like it was very fast. It was over a 3-year process to get to those results that we talked about. And I'd love offline, if you have more detailed questions, we can talk about it. So the first thing, you've heard me say this many, many times, the digital transformation is a human-based transformation. And I think you heard it this morning with the executive panel. They talked about it as well. I could not agree more. It is human-based. The technology is there. It's ready to go. It's about engaging your teams, engaging partners, and culturally shifting your organization. So engage your partners. We saw a great example of that before, right? Engaging logistic partners with UPS and Siemens. That's really what the digital transformation is. It's finding partners, engaging them, and forming tight partnerships that you can rely on each other. Really breaking down those traditional ideas of supplier and customer, and instead becoming partners. And you've heard this, you heard this morning, you've probably heard it in the industry, this idea of customer success. I think it was described this morning as moving away from selling widgets to selling outcomes, even though they're still manufacturing products. I thought that was really good. That's exactly what it is. You may not be moving to a service model, but you still are transforming the organization to say, the product we sell needs to make my customers happy. It's not good enough just to send them. And that's the same in B2B. When you're digitally transforming your organization, even if you're the one buying the software, the technologies, the solutions, reach out to your suppliers and form a partnership. Enter that digital transformation together. And finally, technology plus uncontrolled processes equals expensive uncontrolled processes. And this ties back to that human element there. We can talk all we want about applying technology to the problems we have in our manufacturing facilities, but if your processes are out of control, undocumented, or wasteful, adding a technology stack on top of that will only make them more expensive. It won't solve your problems. Technology enables you to solve your problems, but it itself does not solve its problems. And so you heard this morning that you don't get value from software when you buy it, you get value from software when you start using it. I would argue that it's even a step further, which is you get value from software once it allows you to do something else. So just because I bought Word, turned on Word, typed words in Word, none of these things are valuable. Once I write, a book and it comes out spell checked correctly, which is important for me, then that's where the value came. And so in manufacturing, it's similar. If I apply technology to my digital transformation, but I don't look at my own processes and improve them and get them under control and make sure that I'm doing things the right way, all I'm doing is making expensive processes. By the way, spell check. It's February, which is the month I hate the most because to this day I still can't spell February properly. So I blame spell check for that. So very quickly, because of time, I know we wanted to have some time for questions on the panel at the end. So if you have any questions offline, I'd love to take them afterwards, more detailed. And otherwise, Dick, I'll pass it back to you.